Shalom, welcome to Out of Africa Torah Session. My name is Tatra Cohen, and this week we are on the Torah portion, Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah, or in other words, Sarah's life, as other versions put it. Well, previously we dwelt much about the difference between living and merely survival. And of course, for Sarah, for her to be labeled and considered in the Torah portion as someone who lived, it means her life had purpose and everything. The rabbis tell us that when she had reached 100, it as good as she had completed or accomplished that which God intended with her life. Well, for many of us, it's sometimes barely survival. And it becomes survival not because you have, the necessities, but it's becoming survival because you are yet to find your purpose. But for Sarah, it was very different. Now, today I want us to approach this issue, especially with the debate that we find amongst the rabbis, the majority or the numerous opinions which actually come from many of the rabbis. Now, when you sit to think about Sarah, you should also consider that Sarah is a very important matriarch in the traditions and norms and the customs of the house of Israel. Mind you, many of you may recall that to this day, we actually bless our children the way in the way of Sarah. We say, may Adonai bless you like Sarah. Of course, we go on to say Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. But apart from this, understanding, I want you to begin to see the reason why Sarah is so very important even after her death. It's because of something that she did which is very important. Well, the Torah portion tells us that immediately after she died, it was more like a wake-up call to the husband to say, oh, there's something missing in this picture. And that was the woman like Sarah who should come and continue the generation. But for this to happen, well, there was a lot involved. Of course, we see the servant being tasked to go and bring the bride, and eventually the bride shows up. She is exactly like Sarah, and really like a new model of Sarah, like a new generation of Sarah. But there's something very important our sages tell us, and this is what Sarah did. The Bible tells us of a virtuous woman, and what she does. She brings her bread from this. She makes sure she manages her household and so forth. When you look throughout the Torah and any other historical book from the biblical perspective, you may see clearly that God is very particular in terms of the next generation. Even when you go in the Exodus, the stories, you find everything. When God had a problem with the children of Israel several times, He would make sure that the next generation is preserved. And that was the wake-up call to Abraham. He realized, oh, I only have the son, and there is no woman, so there's not going to be the next generation. So what did he do? He immediately tasked the servant to go and bring the bride, and we see that story continue. But something is very important according to what the rabbis tell us. We are told in the Midrash that Sarah preserved the life of the boy, the life of Isaac. And how did she do this? The Midrash tells us in these words, it says, Sarah in her keenness, she knew that Ishmael's behavior could corrupt Isaac and therefore pull him closer on the way of the Torah. And this is why we are told that Isaac grew on the Torah, on the path of the Torah of her mother. In other words, the rabbis are simply explaining to us here that everything that Isaac knew, he had learned from the mother. In the fear of God, the sacrificial life which Isaac had. At one point, the father takes him to be the sacrificial lamb. What did he do? He did not question the father. you would see the sacrifice which he had. In other words, he had a deeper understanding of the things of God and his purpose for life and his purpose in generation. And he also understood that he was the one to carry, the faith of his father to the next generation. And that was very critical because he was only one. There was nothing like, I'll wait for my sibling, my brother, my sister. This task was upon him. And it was Sarah's credit because she is the one who made sure that the boy is raised exactly in the way of the father. And that alone is a beautiful thing. Today we have got conflicting cultures and weird traditions which we see, especially among the heathen. You may see that there is competition between the father and the mother, and therefore that conflict results in the upbringing of children. Sometimes it bothers me a lot when I look how certain parents are raising their children today in the name of modernity, and for us here in Africa, we call it westernization, like the corrupt behaviors which we are beginning to see being adopted, especially here in Africa. But there is a woman, and this is Sarah, a good example of a God-fearing woman who would make sure the son is exactly like the father, especially in the issues of fearing God. So this is the reason why even after she's dead, she's gone, she's still remembered and respected among the Jewish people. Not only the Jewish people, even in the scripture, to the point that from the 54 Torah portions which we have, Sarah has managed to find herself one which is named after her. And not just the life, but her impact could be felt even when she is dead. And why is it so? This is the reason why the scripture tells us that the righteous are considered alive even after death in the eyes of the living God. So I pray that when you consider the roles or duties or responsibilities of parenting, make sure you do it in a holistic approach, because this is exactly where the heart of God is, to prepare the next generation. What am I trying to say to you today? In short, my message is allow continuity in the things of God. Let the things of God continue and be passed down to the next generation. This was exactly what God told Moses, that everything I've said to you, everything you have learned from this journey, I want you to pass it down to Yehoshua, who will take this generation to the next task. So that's my simple message to you. When you approach parenting, don't take it lightly. It's something where God is very serious on, because it prepares the next generation of a people who should fear God or a people who will forsake God and become failures. Like what Sarah did. The son grew up in the Torah of the mother. Not much is said about her. She was not a prophet, a healer, or whatever you may think of, a preacher, anyone of public ministry. But in the background, she nurtured the boy to be what we have today as the house of Israel. Shabbat Shalom, and thank you all.